listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Today we're going to talk about Arsenal's evolving tactics. We saw a lot of different things at Old Trafford. It wasn't a pretty game. It was scrappy. It was a game where we had to dig deep. We do not play well on that ground. It doesn't matter how good our form is or how bad their form is. We don't play well. And this was a game that wasn't going to be easy. They've dropped over 200 million on their attack this summer, and they've really upped the standard of their squad. But they were also playing in front of 75,000 people. It was the opening day of the season. They had an awful season last year. There was absolutely no way Man United were going to let Arsenal come out and embarrass them in front of their home fans on the opening day. And that's exactly what happened. We used our advantage from a set piece and took the game by the scruff of the neck 10 minutes in. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk specifically about tactics and how we are evolving and how we were adapting to the new players that we've brought in and also the ever-changing demands of the Premier League. Last year, we horseshoed far too much. We played sideways and we went round the block. This year, we're seeing Arsenal starting to go through it a bit more. But first up, I wanted to bring up this quote from Bukayo Saka. So he said, "We're happy with the 3 points. We come to Old Trafford away with a win, but it wasn't a great performance." And these are the key takeaways for me. So he said, it wasn't up to the usual standards. It was basics that went wrong, sloppy giveaways, poor decision making, and that gave United momentum. We didn't get punished, but we can't do that in every game. And that's absolutely right. Bukayo was bang on the money. We got away with some instances yesterday, but there were also plenty of moments where we could have scored. So what he says about sloppy giveaways, that isn't just in dangerous areas where United could punish us, but that's also in sloppy giveaways that were coming in the final third as a result of a poor pass. And I'm going to look at some of these instances. But first up, I wanted to look at our play as a whole. So if you look at, we scored our one big chance, which is a header, but over the course of the game, we only played 1 through ball compared to United's 2, despite the number of counters we had and the number of opportunities that we had to run straight through the middle of the park, through their midfield, and really get our forwards in behind. You look at touches in their box, only 20 touches in their box. At times, Saka has had more touches than that in a single game in the opposition box. And again, you compare it to Man United, 36 touches in our box. That's very unusual. We don't usually see numbers like that. And even offsides, only 2 offsides, that shows that we weren't playing on the last line completely or picking that pass. So this is stuff that we need to work on, and we know it. But interestingly, before the game, I had looked at some of the things we were working on. And one of those things was switches. And ironically, it was United that really hit us hard with switches in this game. They moved the ball extremely effectively to our wide areas, but Arsenal weren't doing it as much as I thought they would and weren't trying to get that space in behind. You look at our passes into the final third, we completed just 61% of them. And this is what I mean about sloppiness coming in different areas of the park. So too often we were getting to the final third of the pitch and we were playing a poor pass. We were playing the wrong pass. It would be overhit, it would be underhit, or it would be released at the wrong time and cut out. And that led to us having 51 passes in the final third compared to United's 95 completed passes and a 74% accuracy. With our long balls, again, just 41% completed with 20 of 49 and just 2 of 11 crosses. In short, this was a game where our technical level was very low. There were players like Calafiori, even Martin Ødegaard to a degree, and Martin Zubimendi who stood out technically. But aside from Calafiori, I don't think anyone maintained their consistency on the ball right through the game. And I mentioned balls straight through the middle. So this was a prime example, just 9 minutes into the game, Martin Ødegaard charging through the middle, and you can see Bukayo Saka running. And this ultimately leads to nothing. You see Gyökeres ahead of him, Martinelli ahead of him, and Arsenal progressing up the pitch on the counter. For a lot of teams, 3v3, 4v3 almost, because he is ahead of his man. This would be a prime opportunity. But what's happened here is all 3 of our players have got very close together. So whilst we're playing more on the transition, we're not quite used to how we operate and how we run. And this is where we need to get smarter. You can see Saka's run starting to come one way, but Gyökeres is also hitting the centre. Martinelli's also going one way. And ultimately, this makes it more congested. So rather than making the pitch big and giving defenders bigger spaces to cover, you're allowing them to become more compact. And this is just a very basic thing that will come from Arsenal playing this way. And again, as we got further up the pitch on this same passage of play, Saka gets the ball and the runs are still going. This time, Saka bent his run and he went outside. So rather than where we had initially started, we ended up playing the ball out wide. And it's a decent opportunity. But on this occasion, Saka mistimes his skip past Mount. And Mount gets a really firm tackle in and gets the ball away from him. This was a really disappointing piece of play from Saka because this should be his bread and butter. He should be skinning Mason Mount all day long. And if he's past him, suddenly Arsenal have 3v2 in the box and Saka's charging into that half space on his left foot in the area where he can absolutely destroy teams. But when I mentioned through balls, one of the reasons why we need to be playing this style of football is if you look at the through ball specialists in Europe, Martin Ødegaard ranks right up there in the highest category. He sits up there with Ryan Shirky, Michael Olise, Lo Celso, who's ironically still up there, Javi Simons and Florian Wirtz. Now, the thing is, he's played that many through balls without having runners to work with. Martin Ødegaard's stats are amazing in this category because he's been playing with ball to feet players in front of him, with Waneri, with Mikel Merino, with Leandro Trossard. We now have multiple runners in the team. And this is why I'm bringing this graphic up, because we're seeing Arsenal play more transitional. We saw it against Athletic Club, and we've seen it at times in the preseason games. Before Gyökeres arrived, we saw Arsenal playing that through ball in behind, and we didn't quite have the players to do it. But as those players started coming back and we started seeing new faces, you start to see why we were working on these things. And yesterday it was very clear. This was a move that I really loved. Calafiori just glided up the pitch and he got it, played it into Ødegaard in between two players on his left foot. Very tight gap, and he just slid it right through, and he kept running, kept advancing up through the center of the pitch. And again, you can see Gyökeres, he's making that run. Now, if this is someone like Kevin De Bruyne on the ball, he gets that ball, opens his body, and plays that ball very, very fast. Gyökeres is up against De Ligt here. He will win a foot race against De Ligt in that moment. And Gyökeres has been heavily criticized for his performance. But if you're in number 9, this is exactly what you should be doing if you're that kind of striker. He's making exactly the run that we've been crying out for. And this is where the likes of Ødegaard, Zubimendi, Rice, and so on need to start playing that pass that moment earlier and giving him every advantage, because we saw it yesterday. When he's 1v1, he's very good at using his physicality and just shrugging a man off. But when he's marked and he's got 2 men on him, suddenly he struggles and you're able to get that ball off him. His first touch is put under pressure. So the earlier we can get it to him, the more fighting chance he has of putting that ball into the box and getting it in the back of the net. And again, this one, Ødegaard moves the ball forward. The pass is on. You can see Saka ahead of him, but he started drifting in field. For me, I would have been wanting to see him pop that ball off to Calafiori in the center, who could have kept the ball moving, just kept it going. Instead, Ødegaard tried to skip past his man, or maybe tried passing it too late. I'm not quite sure what it was, but either way, he lost it very, very softly. And that led to a United counter very quickly. From this position, they got the ball down the pitch and straight out to Mbeumo. And as a result, Arsenal were scampering back. But what you can see in this instance is multiple Arsenal players up the pitch. You've got 6 players entering into the United final third. And that's a big positive because, again, you look at the number of United players back, they haven't got loads of numbers back. And this was a very hot day. So it was a day where running was very, very difficult. But interestingly, I mentioned Gyökeres' runs. You can see he was on the pitch for 60 minutes. His heat map, he was going either side of the box. He was going around the 3. Remember, he's trained with Amaron for 2 years, and he's someone that knows how he likes to operate. And you could see he was trying to go round them rather than hitting straight through the middle where the congestion was. But he was making runs in between those 2 centre back, in between the 3. So getting between either the right centre back and the centre back, or the centre and the left centre back, trying to hit that half space run. It didn't work because he wasn't being fed. If he was getting that pass earlier, suddenly he's putting them under a lot more pressure. And as United were playing a relatively high line by their own standards, he could have really hit them in behind. But if you're making that run time and time again and you're not being fed, you're always going to be judged as having a poor game because ultimately your involvement in the game is very low. And similarly, Martin Ødegaard, he for me was a player that did everything yesterday. And I think as a result, his final ball suffered slightly. He was winning duels, he was all over the park. And you see his heat map. What interested me, and the reason that I did highlight his heat map in particular, is because it's not all right sided bias in the way we usually see. You can see Martin starting to come more central. And with Rice and Zubimendi, I think we will start to see more of a double pivot. And I thought Zubimendi grew into this game, and he was the one getting the ball between the lines into Ødegaard. And in the first half alone, Martin Zubimendi broke the line 6 times, which was more than any other player. By contrast, Declan Rice actually had a very poor game and looked like he was carrying something. But with Ødegaard there, he was getting the ball and he was turning and running very, very effectively, skipping past his man. And his final ball was just off at times. But when you look at his performance as a whole, he was very, very heavily involved. And I would put this as one of his best big game performances away from home for Arsenal. So 63 touches, 25 final third passes. So he was one of the ones that was playing the most final third passes for us. And ahead of him, Saka had a very, very poor game. Gyökeres wasn't at the races. Martinelli was even worse than the two of them. When you're at 8/10 and you're playing these passes, whilst the runners need the service, the passer also needs the players ahead of them to be making magic happen. And on this, we saw Martin Ødegaard win possession 7 times, win 5 duels, make 5 clearances, and then he's also taking his players on, touching the ball in the opposition box, having shots, and creating chances. This was an all-action performance. And I think sometimes when you've got a 10 or an advanced midfielder doing everything, suddenly that final action can suffer. And I think that's what we saw a bit of yesterday with Martin Ødegaard, because we know he can wait his pass perfectly. And we're starting to see a player who's coming back into form. And this is really exciting that we're playing this way just as Ødegaard's game is starting to come together again. But I mentioned Martinelli being worse than all of our attackers. On this occasion, you look at where he's getting the ball. He's carrying it. You can see Saka makes the run. In this instance, the easy pass is just play it forward straight into Saka. But you can see Gyökeres is starting to curve his run and he's starting to go central. What happens is Gyökeres really makes that beeline towards goal and he's getting himself into a really, really dangerous area. Martinelli just needs to play a long straight pass and give his striker a battle to win against a defender. Again, it's De Ligt. De Ligt is not a quick centre-back. And I think our players need to be braver when it comes to releasing the ball and trusting the pace of our forwards. Because on this occasion, I don't know what went through Martinelli's head, but he decided to play the ball behind him to the left-hand side without looking at who was on that opposite flank, and it ended up going out for a throw. It was one of the worst passes you will see all season. And it was also one of the stupidest passes you'll see all season because there was no one there and there was 2 very, very good options ahead of him. So when we're seeing moments like this and we're getting the ball in these situations, you look at the number of players for us that are coming forward. Again, we're starting to create a 4v4 against Man United's defense. This is something that we, again, didn't see last year. So when this clicks, our forwards are going to thrive in these moments because we've seen it before. We've seen it in 22-23. We saw it in 21-22. When we broke, we really, really killed teams. Saka can be very dangerous in these positions because it allows him to really get the ball early before he's doubled and tripled up on. And if Martinelli had given it to him here, he's suddenly in a position where he can play Gyökeres in, or he can keep running and carrying himself. So this is what I mean when it comes to clicking. This is a new style of play. People say, I don't want to see experiments. Well, if you don't want to see experiments, that means you never want to see the style of football change. You can't do something new without experimenting because it's an experiment until it works, until it becomes a rigid pattern of play, and then you keep doing it over and over again. But ultimately, you have to keep changing. So whilst you keep doing things over and over, there's always going to be tweaks and elements of change because otherwise you get figured out. There's huge amounts of data analysis out there. And whilst I'm sitting here talking about these individual moments, you've got specialists diving into the finest details. So when I'm looking at this, it is a case of release that ball quicker. Even if Martinelli played a boring sideways pass to Ødegaard in this position, if he was hell bent on playing a reverse pass, again, Ødegaard's in a position to play that ball down the line to Gyökeres. But this is where we just need to get smarter. We need to get more savvy on the counters, more ruthless, and ultimately think about the simple ball rather than overcomplicating things. And this is another example. Martinelli, and Saka pushing the United back line. Ødegaard running through. Martinelli's going one way. Ødegaard plays an overhit pass, and again, it ends up 10 yards beyond Martinelli. But what I loved seeing was Martin Ødegaard progressing the ball into this area. This is just a mix of miscommunication between two players, alignment slightly off, Ødegaard's final ball not being right, Martinelli's run maybe not going where he would want. And this is teething issues. But the fact that we're seeing this is extremely positive because it shows that we're willing to play this kind of football. And last year, we didn't have the profiles to play it, or perhaps the bravery at times. And this was a great example because this one actually did come off to a degree. Ødegaard got the ball, looks up, Gyökeres on his bike. And I mentioned when I said about De Bruyne would get the ball out of his feet and play it quickly, that's exactly what Ødegaard did here. He got it in his left, and he played it down the line, and Gyökeres on his bike straight through, and he gets the ball right to the edge of the box, and he ends up tripping over his own feet. And again, that's something that I'm not going to worry about because I've seen Gyökeres do things in this position, and you can't say this is the Premier League rather than Portugal because he wasn't under pressure. Until Viktor Gyökeres starts scoring for Arsenal, there's going to be that thing in his head. That will be on his back until that ball goes into the back of the net for the first time. But in this performance, you could see a player that wants to run. You can see a game plan. You can see patterns of play. And you can see how Arsenal are willing to take risks and move the ball up the park. And even at the end of the game, Roy Keane said, Arsenal sat back and didn't look for a second goal. Well, that's not true because I've just showed you all the instances where we went forward on the counter. Right before this moment, Ødegaard slid Saka in, and it took a brilliant block from De Ligt to stop that ball going in the back of the net. On this occasion, it was Saka. Ødegaard played the ball into Saka, and again, this was another transitional moment. Saka plays the cross in after beating a couple of men, and it takes a flying kick into the air from Bruno Fernandes to take the ball out of Madueke's path and ends up hitting him on the hip. Otherwise, on 95 minutes, this could have been 2-0. So whilst Keane said about Arsenal not going to get the second goal, I don't understand where it's come from because there's a difference in sitting back and sitting in tight and making sure you're just seeing out a lead and then going and looking and trying to compete to get the second and not getting it. Arsenal didn't get it, but it wasn't a lack of willingness. But ultimately, one of the big things that we saw yesterday was a lower technical level than usual. And that was an issue because that lower technical level meant that Man United were able to get the switches in. They were able to turn the ball over a lot more. Add in Simon Hooper blowing the whistle every time we went near their players. Our rhythm was completely disjointed. And as a result, I think our players knew we can't go hell for leather in certain circumstances. Things aren't quite clicking within the team. This is where you need to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. You're there for a battle. You're not going to have an easy afternoon. They've got good players who are playing well. Let's make sure we don't give away anything stupid. And United still had chances. So if we had have gone all out and looked for that second goal to kill the game, there's a good chance we could have conceded on the counter because the game was so transitional. And I've highlighted Ben White here because he was one that had a really tough afternoon. He's someone that will be a big threat for us on the counter because he makes those big overlapping runs, as does Calafiori on the other side. But the question will be, should Timber be playing with Calafiori and Lewis Skelly with Ben White to give us that bit more balance? Because White yesterday was run ragged by Dorgu, getting up and down, and United making those big switches very early. And with transitional play and moving the ball through the thirds very, very quickly, it leaves you open to transition. And that's exactly what happened. You see here, Ben White's quite high up the pitch. Bruno Fernandes gets the ball and he sprays it straight out to Dorgu, who's able to progress and move forward very, very fast and ultimately end up hitting the post. And again, this is another example. This was after Sesko come on. You could see our fullback nowhere to be seen in this picture, but I think it's Timber You can see Timber Saka in this image. Cunha gets the ball and he's on the half turn and Sesko's ahead of him and Boomer's ahead of him. And you can see on the far side, you've got Amad Diallo. Arsenal still have 4 players up the park. So whilst we want to see this quick move in football, this is the element of risk that comes with it. This is something that we have to be prepared for. And I'm all for that because we've got Declan Rice, who wasn't quite ready yesterday, who wasn't clearly fit, but is usually an absolute steam train at getting up and down, alongside Jurriën Timber, William Saliba, Gabriel, and multiple other players who can get back and clean up. Even Martin Zubimendi, I mentioned his line-breaking passes, but he's a turnover merchant. He's someone that's so scrappy and so good at knowing where to be. But these instances can't be ignored. These are the things that we will see more of this season if we play faster, more transitional football. Liverpool face a lot of these, and they accept it because they score goals. If we want to score goals in abundance, we have to take risks. We have to get the ball to our forwards earlier. And we also have to take our chances. Because if we don't do that, we're going to end up controlling games, loads of possession, loads of sideways passing, and ultimately reliant on chip balls into the box to try and get a header or a scrappy ball to break down a low block. The faster we move it, the faster we can avoid getting teams set into a low block, and the more unsettled we can make them. But I'm going to leave it with a message from Mikel Arteta. So he said, after 22 years without winning at Old Trafford before I came, now we go into the dressing room, we won, and they're not happy. It's a good sign. And he's absolutely bang on the money. Whenever Arsenal went to Old Trafford year after year after year, we lost. We would play well at times, we would still lose. I mentioned right at the start, it didn't matter how we played. We always came away with a defeat. Been to Old Trafford 8 times, and I've never seen Arsenal win there, which is crazy. But ultimately, what we saw yesterday wasn't a pretty performance. But what it was a game of real tactical evolution from Arsenal. It didn't come off at times. People have said, I wanted to see more tactically from Mikel Arteta. Look, a manager sets you up to play a certain way. When touches are off and distances are off, that's not a tactical issue when it's a one-off. When you're a team like Spurs last season and your distances are all over the place, yes, that's coaching. But when you have a day where a team drags you out of position and things aren't quite right, that's not tactics. That's a game on the pitch that players have to manage. And we saw Mikel Arteta's tactics yesterday, which was clearly get that ball forward, move it fast. Whenever we break, we all go together. We have multiple runners going forward. We're not just having Saka. We're not just having Martinelli and waiting for others to catch up. It was going to have 3 players running forward with Ødegaard going through the middle. And that's only going to improve us. That's going to allow our strikers to score a lot more goals. And ultimately, it comes down to composure, conviction, and real concentration when we get that ball in the final third. And all those things will come with match sharpness and cohesion. And with them, Arsenal will score a lot of goals. Our players will be very happy. And hopefully, we win trophies. But if you've enjoyed this show, please drop a like. Please hit the subscribe button. And please come back for more. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Not everyone's going to agree with my analysis, but I'm always happy to hear other people's thoughts and have a debate in the comment section. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again very soon.